Hey everybody, it's Nancy Scott with Masterpiece Quilting, and welcome to our Snowball Challenge. Yes, not taking snowballs and fighting with each other, even though that could be a lot of fun too. What we're talking about is the Snowball Block. And there's an entire group of designers who right now in the month of February are doing a Snowball Block Challenge. And I would love to share with you a little bit more about this. And in this Watch Me Work video, I'm going to show you how to actually make a snowball block. It is so much easier, and you know what? Your hands don't even get cold while you're doing it. The fabrics that I'm picking for my snowball challenge are some beautiful solids. I've got a fat quarter bundle of Michael Miller Cotton Couture, and this is the So Colorful Color Wheel bundle. So 18 fat quarters altogether. This will give me more than enough fabric to make my sample quilt that I'm working with. And I am pairing that at this stage with pale blue, also Cotton Couture from Michael Miller. And if you are totally crushing on these fabrics just as much as I am, I've got them available in my Etsy shop. So if you need to pick up a bundle of these just because they're oh so pretty, I can get you hooked up with that. So let's talk about our snowball block. I've already cut out my large squares and I have them right here. And when you're making a snowball block, you have large squares and then you have small squares. So I've got my large squares out of all the beautiful bright fat quarter bundles or colors. And then I have my small squares, and they are cut from the pale blue because it contrasts so nicely with all these really deep, rich, bold colors. I wanted just a little bit lighter out here on the edge of my snowballs. The first step that we're going to do is on the smaller squares. We need to mark the diagonal from one corner to the other. Since this is a solid, and to be quite honest with you, I can't tell the right side from the wrong side at this stage of the game. I'm just going to mark one side and consider that to be my wrong side. So lining up here, I am using a fabric marker and use my cutting grid as my guide to draw the diagonal line. And we'll continue that process on all of the smaller squares. Do just one more there. Now, taking one of my larger squares, there we go. I'm going to bring him over here. And typically I would just do this while I'm at my sewing machine, but I'll go ahead and just talk you through the process here. We're going to position one of the small squares on one corner of the larger square. And I want to make sure that my edges are even on these two sides, on my two outer sides. And what we're going to do is then stitch on this drawn line. And we want to be as close to stitching on the drawn line as possible. And when you do that, this is what your block will look like, where we've just stitched across that line. Now we're going to continue the same process, putting a square, aligning it, one of the smaller squares, aligning raw edges on two sides and stitching there, continuing onto this corner and this corner, so that when we get done, we have a block that looks like this. A little bit awkward, but we've got loose edges here and then 4 diagonal stitching lines. Now, before we proceed any further, I'm gonna pull my pressing mat over here just a little bit to make it easier to see. I'm going to very lightly set those seams. Just press across that very lightly. Since we're stitching on the diagonal, it means we're stitching across the biased edges. And before you could see just a little bit of a pucker, so I wanted to press those flat so that we got rid of any of that pucker. Now back over on my cutting mat, I'm going to grab my rotary cutter, or rotary cutting grid, got the 1/4 inch line, position the 1/4 inch line right on my seam line. And I'm going to trim this outer section away. And we're going to just rotate and do that for all 4 corners. If you have a rotating cutting mat, right now is a perfect time to be using it, which of course mine's on the other side of the room. So I'm just going to do it old school here and just rotate by hand. You know what, works just fine. And then when we get done trimming, our unit is going to look like this. So the next step in creating the snowball is we're going to press each of those units away. We're going to flip and then press them away. Many times this is called the stitch and flip technique. And you know what? Now you understand it. We stitch, then we flip. And just moving each one of those. I like to just flip up a little bit. I want to make sure that these seam allowances don't flip under. So I don't want to flip too far. And then just use the weight from the edge of my iron to take that seam out. Hold it just a minute for it to set, and then rotate to the next side. Hey, kind of looks like a snowball, doesn't it? Now we have our snowball block made. Our final step is to make sure that we can square that block up. So using my cutting grid, I just want to make sure that we don't have any of the sections extending beyond the size of the original block, and we don't. If we did, then we can either trim that so that it's perfectly square. If you end up with stitching not right on the line, you can end up with some cases where when you go to turn this back and flip it back, you're not extending far enough. Or if you've stitched too shallow on the opposite side, would be the right hand side of that line, you may end up with a small square that extends way too far and that you have to trim that. So your most important goal is to stitch right on that drawn line. But now we have our first snowball block made, and I've actually got a second one here. These are really quick, really easy, fun to do, and they make such a beautiful design when we get done, which is part of what our snowball challenge is. So I hope you are joining me in the snowball challenge. In this, if you're catching this in a blog post or on YouTube or whatever social media, make sure you're looking for the link to the snowball challenge. And again, I'm Nancy Scott with Masterpiece Quilting, and thank you for joining me in this quick Watch Me Work video where I'm demonstrating the stitch and flip technique to make a snowball block. Bye for now.